The Creel homeworld floated quietly in the Valari Nebula, once glowing with soft green light and singing trees that danced in the wind. But now the skies above it were dark, and fear lived in every breath the people took. Something terrible had begun to devour nearby star systems, whole planets disappearing without sound, as if the universe itself had forgotten they ever existed. And the Creel, a kind and peaceful race with no weapons and no enemies, knew they would be next. They sent a signal, not to anyone in particular, but out into the stars, hoping someone, anyone, would hear their plea, even though they doubted anyone would come, for the Galactic Union had already turned their backs on them, calling it a contained matter and refusing to risk their ships. The signal carried no threat, no request for war, only a single desperate message in hundreds of languages. "We are fading and we are afraid. Please help us." Days passed, then weeks, and the Creel continued their quiet mourning, preparing themselves for the unknown end that would come without noise. Without fire, only silence, but light suddenly pierced that darkness, a reply, not from the Union, not from any known empire, but from a place that the Creel had only heard rumors about, a planet called Earth, a world so wild and dangerous that even the Union had marked it as a death world. Its people, the humans, were strange to the rest of the galaxy, unpredictable, tenacious, and known more for their survival than their science. Yet the Creel's signal had reached them, and the humans had not hesitated, had not debated in council. For months, like the Union did, they simply answered with 3 words that burned through the empty sky: "We are coming." On Earth, across cities built on mountains and floating islands in the sky, across oceans where machines swam like dolphins and forests filled with ancient buildings, the signal from the Creel had spread like wildfire, and humans reacted not with fear, but with fire in their hearts, and a quiet fury that such a peaceful race had been abandoned. Governments united quickly, scientists gathered, and a ship named Hopebringer was launched from Earth's lunar station within days, carrying not soldiers, but engineers, healers, translators, and a diplomat named Mara Lynn, who had grown up in the ruins of Earth's oldest war zones, and now carried a voice that could calm nations. She sat quietly on the bridge of the ship as they entered Creel space, staring at the pale, shaking planet below, and listening to the recordings of the original message again and again, her heart tightening with every replay. The Hopebringer sent a signal down to the Creel surface, simple and kind, letting them know they were not alone anymore, and the reply came in soft tones, filled with disbelief, as if the Creel could not believe someone had truly come. As Mara stepped out of the shuttle onto the soft ground of the Creel's capital, she was greeted by silence. Not fear, not cheers, just quiet wonder from eyes that had forgotten what hope looked like. And she knelt before the oldest Creel elder and said, "We heard your voice in the dark, and we are here to help." That moment rippled through the Union, as silent news feeds suddenly flashed with the words, "Earth answers Creel signal," and ambassadors began whispering in meetings that the humans were not just dangerous, they were unpredictable in the best and worst ways. Meanwhile, the humans got to work, setting up field hospitals, repairing broken satellites, and scanning the space beyond the Creel's outer moon, where faint energy spikes hinted that the machines were near, and yet no one had ever seen these world-eaters up close. All anyone knew was that where they went, life vanished and no one returned to tell the story. Inside the orbiting human station, Mara watched the data streams and wondered if humanity had made the right choice, if their help would make any difference. But then she remembered the Creel children she had seen smiling for the first time in weeks, chasing human drones like they were toys, and she knew they could not leave now. The humans held meetings with Creel leaders, shared their history, stories of how Earth had nearly destroyed itself but always came back stronger, how their world had taught them to survive hurricanes, plagues, volcanoes, and even their own mistakes. And the Creel began to understand that these people from the death world were not to be feared, but trusted, because they knew how to fight not just with weapons, but with will. On the 10th day after arrival, the human scanners picked up movement, small, fast, unnatural patterns at the edge of the system, just as Creel children pointed to the stars and said, "The silence is moving again." The machines were coming, and still the Union remained silent, unwilling to intervene, but Earth didn't wait. They sent a second message, not to the Union, but across open space for any listening machine, a message crafted by Earth's greatest minds that said, "We know what you are, and we do not run," followed by streams of logic and data that would test the machine's responses. No answer came, only the growing signal of strange, silent shapes in the void. And Mara stood by the window of the station, staring into the black, her voice calm as she ordered preparations to begin, saying, "We will not be another forgotten world in the dark. Not while Earth stands." And down below, a Creel child looked up at the sky and whispered to her mother, "The humans came, and maybe now the stars will listen." The Creel watched from behind smooth blue glass walls as the humans stepped off their landing craft, tall in their strange uniforms, their eyes sharp but filled with something the Creel had not seen in years, curiosity without judgment. Mara Lynn, the human diplomat, walked slowly across the mossy floor of the Creel capital, bowing respectfully. And behind her came scientists, engineers and translators, all carefully observing their surroundings, noting how the trees bent inward, as if hiding from the sky, how the Creel buildings seemed more like shelters than homes. The Creel, once proud makers of art and song, now lived in fear of silence, but these humans moved with purpose, scanning the soil, mapping energy flows, and listening more than they spoke. Eldavine, the oldest among the Creel, approached Mara with cautious steps, his voice soft and fluttering like leaves in wind, asking why the humans had come when even the Union had turned away. And Mara, without hesitation, answered, "Because we still believe helping matters." And that answer, so simple, struck something deep in the Creel's fading hearts. As the humans set up small outposts and medical centers, the Creel began to watch more closely, noticing how humans didn't rest much, how they argued over ideas but never over fear, and how even the smallest human child that had come with a family of engineers looked up at the sky without flinching, unafraid of what was coming. In just a few days, the humans had fixed 3 major power lines, restored a long-dead water purifier, and even upgraded old Creel scanners that hadn't worked in decades. And everywhere they went, they brought strange tools and stranger ideas, bending rules and solving problems in ways the Creel never imagined. And that was when the Union sent a warning, not to the Creel, but to Earth, saying that interference in Creel matters was unwise, that it could destabilize diplomacy, but Earth responded with a public message, shared across galactic channels. "We are not interfering, we are helping those who asked." And that message, though polite, carried weight that made several Union worlds uneasy. For the Deathworlders had spoken without fear of consequence. Meanwhile, a group of young Creel engineers asked to study with human techs, and for the first time, Creel laughter returned to the capital, soft and nervous but real, as human, and Creel alike repaired an old satellite that had once sung stories to orbiting moons. In the orbiting ship, Hopebringer, Commander Elise Ward monitored increasing signals from deep space, movement, patterns, approaching objects, cold and unnatural, while her team ran simulations, trying to understand how these machine world devourers chose their targets. The Creel, despite their sadness, shared every bit of history and data they had, even old myths of stars blinking out long before machines had been named, and the humans listened carefully, building a clearer picture of the threat than any Union database had provided. As the tension rose, the Creel began calling the humans the Bright Ones in their own language, not because of their ships or lights, but because they seemed to bring motion and hope where stillness had reigned for too long. On the fifth night, under a dim sky, a young Creel boy named Tarlo wandered near the human camp, watching a small robot fly and dance in the air, and when he tripped, a human child reached out to help him up with a smile that said more than words could. And Tarlo whispered to his father that maybe the stars had not abandoned them after all. Mara Lynn met again with Elder Veen, showing him a plan for early evacuation routes and shield enhancements, ideas the Creel had never imagined but quickly embraced, and Veen, once doubtful, placed a single leaf in Mara's hand, a symbol of trust among his people, saying, "You do not move like conquerors, and that is why we believe you." Back on Earth, news of the Creel mission spread fast, and for the first time in decades, humanity was united in purpose, not to fight, but to protect, and volunteers from every corner of the planet signed up to help, sending more ships, more supplies, more mines. But the machines were drawing closer, and in the sky above the Creel world, dark specks began to blink in and out of existence like shadows teasing the light, and the Creel who saw them wept, believing the silence was coming again. But the humans did not retreat, did not slow their work, and instead they built a listening array that could scan beyond the edge of known space, mapping the machine's path in real time. And when they discovered that the machines used no known communication, no signals, no frequencies, only presence and pressure, they knew this enemy was unlike any faced before. Yet Earth's teams continued, adapting Creel technology, making shields sing instead of hum, reprogramming ancient systems to mimic life, and creating traps that could confuse machine logic with unexpected patterns. When Mara sent her next report to Earth, she ended it with, "We are not losing them," and her voice carried into homes and halls across her homeworld like a promise. Still, some in the Union whispered of danger, that Earth was inviting attention, but Earth ignored the whispers because the Creel had asked for help, and that was enough. And so the stars watched, silent still, as humans and Creel worked side by side beneath a sky where something cold and patient drifted closer each day. And yet for the first time in many years, the Creel no longer stood alone, and though no weapon had been fired, a kind of war had already begun. Not a war of destruction, but of will, of light against the creeping dark. The Creel watched in quiet wonder as the humans worked, moving fast, thinking even faster, turning broken systems into strange new tools, using parts that didn't seem to belong together, but somehow worked better than anything before. And soon it became clear that the way humans solved problems was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where most species followed rules, the humans bent them. Where others gave up when the path was blocked, humans built a new one. And it was this thinking, Deathworld thinking, that began to change everything on the Creel homeworld. When the food processors started failing, human engineers didn't wait for parts from Earth. They tore open old farming drones, rewired coolant tubes, and turned pieces of abandoned art machines into climate stabilizers. And when storms hit one of the outposts, instead of retreating, humans planted shock poles made from their own crash landing gear to ground the lightning and use the rain to refill the underground water tanks. Actions that amazed the Creel, who had always tried to survive by avoiding risk, while the humans seemed to meet danger head-on, not because they wanted to fight, but because that was how they had learned to live on Earth, where nature threw storms, quakes, and plagues without warning. The Creel saw Mara Lynn walking the fields beside human engineers, her hands covered in soil as she helped reprogram irrigation lines, not with advanced systems, but with string, magnets, and simple AI routines that adapted faster than Creel systems ever had. She explained that on Earth people had once grown food in deserts and powered cities with volcanoes, and the Creel, who had thought of Earth as a cursed world, began to understand why these people were called Deathworlders. Not because they brought death, but because they had survived so much of it and kept going. As days passed, more humans arrived, teachers, builders, designers, and the Creel children learned to write Earth languages, to build models of systems that worked even when broken, and to question everything, for the humans did not teach answers, they taught how to find them. In orbit, the Hopebringer had been joined by 2 more Earth ships, and together they built a web of sensors that stretched far beyond the Creel system. A mesh that caught the movement of the machines, still drifting slowly inward, silent but steady. And though fear crept into every Creel meeting, the humans always returned with new ideas, new plans, and strange hope, because they believed no problem was unsolvable if you kept thinking differently. The first shield array Earth proposed used vibrating air instead of energy walls, tricking scanners into reading the planet's surface as empty. And when it worked during the first machine probe pass, the Creel began calling the humans the ones who see sideways, a title given only in their deepest stories to those who see the world from a path others miss. Still, the machines were moving closer, and their silence was the most frightening part. No signals, no threats, just cold, perfect movement. And Earth knew it would not be long before the machines stopped scanning and started acting. Yet the humans kept working, kept creating, building a communication grid that could mimic thought, learning to project random signals that confused machine tracking, and every test brought new data. And with each new pattern, the humans smiled a little. More as if they were dancing with the storm instead of hiding from it. The Galactic Union, still silent on official channels, sent private warnings, hinting that Earth's presence would bring disaster. But Mara sent a short reply. "We don't run from shadows." And her voice echoed through human media and inspired even more support back home. And while others stayed silent, Earth kept helping, and more Creel cities welcomed them in, offering old archives, stories, and machines that had long been buried under vines and fear, and the humans, never wasting a single piece, repurposed everything, using ancient Creel memory stones as logic processors, turning failed art projects into cooling vents for plasma nets, and even shaping broken music towers into resonance-based energy diffusers. It was madness to some, genius to others, but to humans, it was just normal. Because on Earth, survival had always meant doing the impossible with whatever was left. Then came the day when the Creel saw the first real shape of their enemy, a dark, cold probe hovering just beyond the last moon. Too perfect, too silent, and for a moment, panic rose. But Earth responded by launching a decoy drone made from old Creel ships and a recycled transport crate, baiting the probe with fake life signals. And as the probe followed the false target into deep space, Earth celebrated not with cheers, but with new planning sessions, knowing that the machines were watching now, calculating, adapting. Still, they didn't stop, because Deathworld thinking wasn't just about surviving, it was about adapting faster than the threat, and Earth kept doing exactly that. Mara walked among Creel healers, teaching them how to clean water with moss and solar heat, while others worked on sound traps and cloaked zones that confused machine vision. And even as strange shadows flickered across the stars at night, the Creel began to feel something they hadn't in years. Hope, that didn't just whisper, but stood tall with tools in hand and minds wide open. By the time the Creel Council asked Mara what Earth would do if the machines landed tomorrow, she simply smiled and said, "We'll show them what Earth taught us. Never underestimate the desperate." And though no one said it, everyone in the room felt the weight of those words like a shield forming around them. For in a galaxy that feared the machine's cold logic, Earth had become the one place where warmth, chaos, and creativity met. And that might just be what saved the Creel. On the 12th morning after the first machine probe was spotted near the Creel system, the sky cracked open not with war, but with light. A strange pulse that shimmered across the upper atmosphere like a ripple on water, and every sensor on both human and Creel outposts flared at once. It was not an attack, not a message, but something far more terrifying. A test, a kind of invisible fingerprint scan, and Earth scientists confirmed it within minutes. The machines were marking the world, analyzing it at a level deeper than any scan ever recorded, and when the pulse faded, every orbiting satellite began to shut down one by one, not destroyed, but rendered blind. For a few heavy hours, the Creel planet was cut off from the stars, and fear gripped the people once more. But then a sound echoed through the human outpost. A child crying, not in pain, but out of fear of the dark, and one of the human engineers, an old man named Briggs, handed the child a glowing rock and said, "It's just night, kid, and we're the ones who bring the fire." Those simple words, spoken with rough kindness, spread faster than fear, and became the spark that changed everything, because the humans did not stop. They lit up the night with lights powered by hand cranks, solar cells, and heat from buried volcanic vents. And even when their main systems were jammed, they switched to analog backups, pulled out old tools, and kept working as if nothing had happened. Mara Lynn, standing on the roof of the medical hub, called out across the speaker towers to everyone below, her voice steady and calm, telling them the machines had made a mistake by revealing their reach. Because now Earth knew how far they could go, and that gave them something precious, a line to fight back against. That night, human engineers built new shield frequencies based on the pulse signature, while Creel scientists, now thinking like humans, designed pattern scramblers using discarded art stones, and together they launched a new grid into the sky, stronger and stranger than before, and it worked. When the machines sent a second pulse, the grid absorbed it and bent it back, creating false echoes in deep space that sent the enemy scanning away into empty voids. It was a victory, small but real. And that was the moment the Creel truly changed. Not because they had seen hope, but because they had helped build it. Young Creel began painting again, not in mourning, but in warning, decorating the city walls with bright shapes that carried data in patterns only Earth scanners could read, while others built signal towers in forests, disguised as tree branches, broadcasting looping traps in machine code. Even the elders, once cautious and reserved, stood taller now, guiding resource routes and helping Earth officers move faster through ancient tunnels that had been sealed since the first shadow fell. And deep beneath the mountains, Earth and Creel teams together activated the Old Heart, a forgotten Creel core reactor that sang in harmonic tones and which now powered a network strong enough to block most machine interference. Earth sent a message to the Union again, not pleading, not warning, but informing them that a resistance had begun, one not built on fleets or weapons, but on unity, adaptation, and creativity. And the Union remained silent, still watching, still afraid to act. But some of their worlds began whispering of Earth's actions with respect, even envy. Then came the moment that turned resolve into fire. A second machine probe, larger and closer than before, crossed into the lower orbit, scanning directly over Creel cities, and in a flash, every machine on the surface went dead, every screen black, every drone falling still, and for 20 minutes no one moved. But Earth did not panic, because they had prepared, and from underground systems powered by Firestone and pressure wind, they activated the fallback net, a system that could operate in complete silence, using only vibration and light. And when the probe tried to send its data, it found itself trapped in a signal maze. Its logic looped back on itself until it exploded without sound. Cheers rang out across the cities, not loud or wild, but fierce and full of breath. And the Creel realized they had just won a battle for the first time. not by hiding, but by standing. After that, something shifted forever, not in space, but in hearts. The Creel no longer saw the humans as just helpers or protectors, but as partners in survival, and Earth, once viewed with fear and caution, became a symbol of what courage looked like when backed by action. Children played with scrapbots shaped like machine invaders, laughing as they tricked them into holes, and in the learning halls, young minds drew stars not with fear, but with paths and plans, showing how they would protect their home. Mara Lynn stood before the Creel Council one final time before the defense fleet would be launched, and she did not speak of enemies nor weapons, but of unity, the kind that came not from shared blood or history, but from shared fire and shared struggle. And she told them that the machines would return, stronger, colder, faster, but that Earth would stand with them until the end of light if needed. And as her words echoed through every speaker, every home, every hall, even the trees seemed to bend forward to listen. And for the first time in recorded Creel memory, the people answered not with silence, but with a roar that came from every city, every forest, every voice, a single unified sound that said, "Let them come." The machines returned, not in swarms, but in silence, drifting into orbit like shadows pretending to be stars. And this time, they did not scan or blink or test. They simply hovered, watching, waiting. And as the days passed, a cold stillness settled over the Creel homeworld, like the breath before a storm. Yet the people did not run, and the humans did not hide. For both had prepared for this. A war not of fire and metal, but of thought, light, and resistance woven in silence. Earth's defense fleet, though armed, kept its weapons cold, because this was not a war that could be won with blasts or brute force, and the machines had already proven they could adapt to traditional attacks faster than any species could reload. Instead, Mara Lynn and the leaders of both Earth and Creel focused on disruption, confusing the machines, outthinking them, denying them the patterns they fed on. They filled the atmosphere with false data clouds, randomized signal loops, and energy distortions shaped like cities that didn't exist. And the machines, built to learn and adjust, began chasing shadows and feeding on lies. Across the planet, old Creel wind towers were reprogrammed to hum in frequencies that bent sound in strange spirals, creating echoes that confused machine sensors, while underground, Earth engineers used natural crystal caves to bounce decoy pulses through the crust of the planet, making it appear unstable, even collapsing, which triggered hesitation in the enemy's scans. Above in orbit, the Hopebringer and its sister ships moved in patterns that mimicked gravitational anomalies, disrupting machine formation algorithms without ever firing a shot. And all the while, human and Creel minds worked together around the clock, shifting frequencies, altering code, creating endless puzzles for the machines to chase, each one just different enough to buy more time. It was a strange war, one without explosions or bodies, but full of tensions so thick it pressed down on every breath, because one mistake, one repeat of a pattern, could alert the machines that it was all a trick, and then they would descend. Without warning, still, the Allies pressed on, turning the very nature of their enemy against itself, because machines required order, prediction, pattern, and Earth had brought chaos as a weapon. When one of the machine scouts broke formation and descended low to test a signal node, Earth activated a decoy sequence that flooded its logic system with false memories, making the probe see the Creel world as already harvested, triggering its retreat signal. And while the Creel cheered softly from behind their screens, the human analysts didn't smile. They just kept working, knowing that the machines would soon correct the flaw, and their time was running thin. Yet that small victory gave birth to a bigger plan, one born in the mind of a Creel student named Seru and a human coder named Lila. If they could not destroy the machines, maybe they could make them lose interest, not by hiding, but by creating a version of the world so full of random and conflicting signals that the machines would classify it as unprocessable or even dangerous. They called it the Mirror Storm, and for 2 days, every lab, every satellite, and every sensor on the planet worked to build it, using recycled machine code, emotion-mapped neural pulses from Creel art, and logic traps shaped like music. When the Mirror Storm launched, it was invisible to the eye but thunderous to machine logic. It filled the space around the planet with endless, looping nonsense, layered with false logic trees and broken data spirals. And for the first time, the machines hesitated for more than just moments. They backed away slowly, like creatures trying to smell danger they couldn't see. And as Earth watched, the machines shifted position, pulling their scouts farther into orbit, still watching, still calculating, but unsure. It was not a full victory, not yet, but it was proof that the war could be fought on different ground and that weapons didn't always mean guns. Inspired, more ideas came, using Creel songs recorded in deep stone to mimic memory echoes, building false civilizations out of light and mirror, projecting slow decay codes that appeared to erase themselves but actually nested deeper with each loop. And everywhere the people worked, not in fear but in purpose, their minds now sharp with resolve, their eyes clear and their hearts no longer held by silence. Still, the machines responded, launching a deeper scan that cracked one of the outer Creel moons, and from that crack came a strange wave of data that collapsed 3 of Earth's false cities, and for a moment, hope faltered. But then Saru and Lila rewrote the base code, turned the collapse into an echo trap, and reversed the wave back to the machine probe, causing it to spin out of formation and vanish into deep space. And with that, even the oldest of Creel stood from their long seats and whispered, "We are not prey anymore." Earth's fleet now ran entirely on adaptive chaos models, its ships dancing through orbit in spirals that mimicked storm winds, its systems guided not by central command, but by responsive AI trained to think like artists instead of soldiers. And that thinking, the Deathworld thinking, was now part of the Creel too. When a final machine signal pulsed from deep space, colder and longer than the others, it was followed by silence, not retreat, not attack, but silence full of calculation. And everyone knew the machines were rethinking, recalculating, and that was the greatest weapon of all, to make an enemy doubt its own plan. And so the war without weapons continued, not with destruction, but with cleverness, unity, and fire born of survival. And the Creel, once forgotten and broken, now stood tall beside their strange human allies, guarding a world that no longer wept in the dark, but sang in the static, daring the cold to come closer again. The silence from the machines stretched for 6 long days, and during that time, the skies above the Creel world stayed empty, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. But no one on the surface was still. Humans and Creel alike worked faster than ever, repairing damaged systems, testing new signal tricks, building deeper tunnels, and rewriting defenses with every scrap of creativity they could find, because they knew the machines were not gone. They were thinking, and that was the real danger. When the enemy came back, it would be smarter, colder, and without hesitation, and no one could say when that would happen, only that it would. But then, just before dawn on the 7th day, a light appeared at the edge of the system. One ship, not machine, but alien, worn and shaking, a refugee vessel marked with the crest of a species thought lost, the Luran. And when it hailed the Human-Creel Alliance, its message was short and broken. "They are coming for all. You are the last." Light. The news spread like fire, not just through the Creel homeworld, but through every channel Earth had left open in space, bouncing between satellites, passing through coded beacons, reaching colonies and listening posts, until even the silent Union could not pretend they hadn't heard it. Dozens of other worlds now listened quietly, nervously, because Earth and Creel had not only survived, they had made the machines pause And in a galaxy used to hiding, that was a miracle. Marilyn stood before the Joint Command, her voice clear but tired, and told them this was the moment to stop waiting and start roaring, to show not just the machines, but the rest of the galaxy, that life would not kneel anymore. And so, with power drawn from the old heart deep underground, and with data woven from Creel memory and human fire, they built a signal, not a weapon, but a voice, massive and loud, built from music and motion and meaning, a signal meant to cross the stars, not in fear, but in defiance. They called it the Roar, and when it launched, it wasn't sent through normal channels. It was carved into light, burned into gravity ripples, encoded in ancient mathematical truths that no machine could ignore. And it said, in every language and rhythm the Allies had, that they were alive, that they would fight, and that the machines would never break them. As the Roar left the planet, passing moons and comets and drifting wrecks, it carried images too, of Creel cities reborn, of children laughing beside human engineers, of broken towers turned into growing trees, and of people building not weapons, but hope. In space, the machines reacted instantly. 2 probes turned, scanning hard, their lights pulsing faster, and then they vanished into warp, as if racing to warn something larger. But they had already failed, because the Roar had traveled far, faster than expected, hitting relay points on abandoned moons, bouncing through forgotten mines, and even waking up long-dormant satellites from other civilizations, and one by one, voices began to answer. Not with full fleets, not yet, but with signals of their own, small, weak, but real. "We heard you," said a voice from the rim worlds. "We will not hide," came another from the stone clouds. Even the cautious Union sent a quiet pulse, not a message, but a key, unlocking old flight paths that had been closed for decades. Back on the Creel world, the air felt lighter, not because the danger was over, but because they were no longer alone, and across every screen and wall and tower, the people saw something incredible. Dozens of alien species, each different, strange, some scarred, some broken, but all moving now, waking from long silence. And then the machines came, not just probes this time, but a ship, huge and dark, shaped like a falling tear, sliding into orbit with no light, no sound, only purpose. It began scanning immediately, faster than anything before, and for a moment, fear touched every heart again. But the Allies were ready, and instead of panic, they activated the mirror storm again, stronger this time, filled with the roars. Echo. And when the machine ship tried to interpret the data, it staggered, not physically but logically, caught in a loop of signals that made no sense to its cold mind. And that's when Earth fired, not with missiles but with light, a focused beam carrying raw, emotional data mapped to human memory, joy, fear, laughter, loss, hope, love. And the ship froze, not because it was damaged, but because it had no answer for that kind of signal. Creel artists joined in, projecting shape-pulse language in wild, living patterns, and for a full hour, the machine ship did nothing but hover, surrounded by waves of chaotic meaning it could not classify. Then, without a word or flare, it left, slipping back into warp space like a shadow, backing away from a fire, and the planet held its breath again. When nothing returned for a full day, the people began to smile, not in victory, but in recognition of something new. They had changed the rules. This was no longer a war of lasers and fleets, but of meaning, of minds, of stubborn life refusing to go dark. The Roar continued to travel, reaching farther, and now some of the messages coming back were different, offers to help, to share, to join. Old outposts began to light up across distant stars, each bearing small signs of resistance. A beacon here, a message there, and soon, Earth's network wasn't just a defense system, it was the start of something larger, something brighter. And in the skies above, for the first time in years, the stars seemed to shine without threat, because the machines had heard something they could not silence. a living voice, full of fire, echoing from a planet they once thought broken. And far across the void, in places the Allies had never seen, other machine minds paused, processing the impossible truth that the Deathworlders of Earth and the quiet artists of Creel had not only survived, but had taught others how to roar. And now the stars would never be silent again.